The theme for our sermon today is upgrading wisdom. So we're always upgrading our devices. So this is a pretty important device too, so maybe it could use some upgrading as well. So the seventh UU principle is respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And the first UU source principle is the direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. So this brings up a question. How can we participate in and contribute to the interconnected reality we are all part of? And that interconnected reality is much more than what we perceive with the world of the senses. Scientists are postulating that there's 10 or 21 dimensions. Mystics talk about 7 or 14 subtle levels of reality. So we exist in a much broader reality than we usually are aware of, and we can become capable of participating in that much more fully than we normally do. And so one necessary ingredient in that participation is presence. So what does presence mean? Well, all of you are physically present here, okay? But as we know, we can be physically present and we can be off on our cell phones, we can be thinking about something later in the day or earlier in the day, we can be thinking about some issue that we're having to deal with, and it's not often the case that we make ourselves fully available to whatever we're experiencing, including whoever we are connecting with. And so much more can happen when we're able to connect in a much fuller way than we usually do. I'm a retired psychologist. I was a psychologist for almost 40 years. And oftentimes, some of the best sessions, I hardly said a word, but I was really fully present to the person coming and just really listened to them. And there's a very deep healing that can take place in that connection, which we don't often have in our lives. We usually experience the world in a kind of separated state of being, where we're trying to analyze and react to what we are experiencing instead of being in the now with it.
So you might call that state that he's talking about here, introducing, as an unfolded state, or a loving state. A state in which we reach beyond the boundaries of who we usually think that we are. That way it's not like a ping pong ball going from one side to the other, but a realm. There's different words for it in different traditions. I've heard of the words barzakh, which is a place in which everything is connected. So whatever in your vocabulary means this unfolded situation and an extension of your being beyond the boundaries that you feel, that would be a kind of state that would be introducing different possibilities and upgrading the wisdom that you already have within yourself.
So there's a wonderful scientist named William Tiller who has done research with subtle energy. And I won't go into the details, but he essentially proved from his experiments that whenever something was done that introduced subtle energy into a physical environment, it actually changed the ordinary laws of physics, where instead of disorder increasing, actually order increased. And I feel like we bring subtle energy into situations by being fully present, by being opened up to much more of ourselves than we usually are. So William Schultz said that Unitarian Universalism affirms that creation itself is holy, the earth and all its creatures, the stars and all their glory, that the sacred or divine, the precious and profound are made evident not in the miraculous or supernatural, but in the simple or everyday. So Diane and I have written some books. One's called Becoming a Human Divine Being, and one's called
Beyond the Wonderful.
Beyond the Wonderful. And I have a proposed idea. If we write another book, it might be called Ordinary Miracles. Because just like this quote I read, the miracles aren't something, I mean, they might be in some profound mystical experience, but they're in just the thick of things. So there was a great Sufi who lived hundreds of years ago named Ibn Arabi, and he said that every soul has access to a unique part of the divine wisdom that no other soul ever can or will have access to. And this really struck me when I thought about this, because I used to think when I began my spiritual search, I wanted to become like the Buddha. I wanted to know everything that the Buddha knew. But then I realized that each of us can potentially know something that even the Buddha couldn't possibly know. And it's not a matter of discovering something that's sitting up in the Akashic record somewhere. It hasn't even been created yet. It's created through our experiences and our relationship with what we are experiencing. And that's just as an individual. But one reason we're doing this sermon the way we are, going back and forth, is to try to be kind of a model of what happens when two people connect with each other and allow their insights and energies to go back and forth, and there's an inspiration that arises, and the result is that, and this has happened so many times when we've taught together, we'll discover something on the fly that neither one of us could have possibly thought of separately. So it's not a matter of 1 + 1 is 2. 1 + 1 is way, way more than 2.
So as he's speaking then, I'm feeling his energy, right? I'm feeling your energy. So again, we're, this unfolded state. Hopefully we're participating in that right now. That'll help us too, And that uniqueness that he's speaking about, it's like the freshness of your being. It's another word I like to use a lot, the freshness. That sometimes, seeing a child, looking at nature, brings us this freshness that then changes things within us, and then we can bring this present to others. I want to read a poem that I brought for you, because all of us are nature lovers. I mean, I bet you anything I could say that about everybody in here. Anyway, I sure am. And this was a poem I wrote during a retreat that I had. Tree, I see thee. Emerald beauty, shot through and through with sunbeams. I see those sparrows chatting in your hair, scuffling around between your toes for a soft bit of nest fuzz. Do we share a secret? Are those branches stretching up to a place you feel you can never reach? I see the reflections of your intricate branches, looking so flattened out on the ground below. Don't think that's a true image of your worth. You were made for more than a chat room or nesting supply warehouse. I know that finer thoughts spin around inside your deeper layers, circulating essences and distilling them for some earthly ritual. You too inherit a legacy of access between realms. As you dispense your potions, a part of you reaches into light itself, with all those fractal structures now transformed into crystal and messengers, the light body of a tree. You are a majestic creation, linking by your unique presence worlds above and below, inside and outside. Tree, I see you today. So this poem, and we didn't know what each of us was going to say because we didn't want to have just some canned script, so a lot of this is spontaneous. So this fits right in with something that a great Sufi named Hazrat Inayat Khan said, that there is but one sacred scripture, and the leaves of the trees are the pages of that scripture, which I think is so beautiful. And this is obviously a metaphor, but it means that life itself, we've taught a whole series of classes called Life is Our Teacher, that if we are in a proper state of connection with what we're experiencing, that everything is potentially a portal to the sacred, everything without an exception. And it depends on how we relate to that circumstance. It doesn't mean that the situation is going to magically become wonderful. It might be horrible, but the way we relate to it can open up some possibilities both in ourselves and anybody else involved in that situation. So I was thinking, one thing that I think is so wonderful about Unitarian Universalism is everyone
is encouraged to develop their own belief system. We don't have some set belief system everybody is supposed to follow. But in the interactions between us from these diverse points of view, then wonderful things can arise. But what's a necessary ingredient? Well, as I said, presence is one, but another one is an openness and a receptivity, because for most of us, our default mode is to listen and process through our previous concepts and go, okay, I'll buy that because it fits in with what I see, or maybe you'll take it because it makes more sense than the way you saw something, but it's kind of, you're still analyzing it. You're not really in a situation that is open to discovering something. So I think that the Sufis talk about the allegory of our soul. It's like the story of our soul. Each of us has our own unique story, which has been unfolding all of our lives, and we are contributing to it. And we could say that that allegory is sacred scripture. Each of our lives is an emergent sacred scripture, but when there's a connection between two people, or better yet, more people, then the sacred scripture that can arise from that is much, much more than could happen through any individual separately. So in this wonderful children's story about Indra's net, that a change in one jewel changes all the jewels, it is true. Physicists postulate that everything in the universe is entangled with everything else, that everything has an instantaneous effect with everything else. So depending on how much we are in resonance with other people with like-minded intentions, at the same time keeping the uniqueness, we're not just disappearing, then we have a tremendous power to bring about new possibilities that would not exist from a whole bunch of people working together, but in a separated state of awareness.
So let's look at that uniqueness one more time. So I've thought before, I've heard of a teacher that really wasn't very well known to the world, but his student was one that was very well known to the world. And I've thought before too, in the classes that I've taught and the classes that he's taught, it could mean that the effect of just maybe, I like to say loving someone or having some effect on someone is going to change them to be something that we never could even measure. And we don't know who that is. I was a teacher for a long time too, and I don't know which one of those, might be, doing many things, changing on a grand scale. But then I also don't know all those little moments, maybe that change all of the birds, and all of the moments that change the way that people see things and what they could do in science. So this sharing and upgrading wisdom that we're speaking about is unknown to our brains, but it's something that is becoming more and more known to our hearts. And as you meet together, it's so important for you to be in community with other beings, because this process keeps happening. One of us all by ourselves, right, we're hollow in that way. We feel like we're the separate thing then. And so we need to continue this community.
And what is really important is an openness to discovery. So we've got this man that regularly comes and treats our house for pests of different sorts. His name is Mike, and he likes to talk. And he was just there yesterday, I guess, or the day before, and he started filling me in about mice. And he was telling me, it's like this whole world about mice I had no idea of. And he was telling me about deer and the bucks, and and it was like the wisdom that he had. This was like a Zen pest control teacher. And I was just delighted listening to him, because it was like this whole world opened up that I could have easily just thought, oh, he's the pest control guy, I'm going to go do something else, let him go about his business. But it's incredible what we can discover, especially when we connect with people that we think we have nothing whatsoever in common with, and we think we couldn't possibly learn anything from them, especially people that have very, very different points of view than we have. But when we really listen to someone like that, I think you'll find that that other person tends to soften up and open up and find this place of connection beyond some fixed belief system that they might have, and you're really just seeing them as the person. Pure Light would talk about seeing that which transpires behind that which appears, seeing what's underneath the surface, having that freshness of perception. And the Sufis say that there's a new creation born at every instant. Well, this goes right with what the physicists say. They say that time is not continuous. There's a smallest unit of time, the Planck unit of time. So time is like these discrete Planck units, one after the other, and there's an in-between that you can't really talk about. But we always have the possibility at the next new instant of creation of bringing something forth that wasn't there in the previous one. But we have to be in this state of relationship where we're really feeling a connectedness, and we also have an intention that we're wanting to bring forth, and then things that seem miraculous can happen. Try it and see.
Well, I'm going to underline something that he said, and that is that we have recurrent creation. That means that creation is happening over and over again, and doesn't mean that we're going back to what it was like at the first creation, but that we're going to a creative place over and over again. We can't see that happening. And even the physicists, everybody's talking about this sort of thing. It's hard for us to, again understand. So that circulation I was talking about earlier is not only a circulation among people or nature, it's actually going back into time and place. And you are I like the word alchemist. Alchemy, it's a magical something or other that's going on that we can't describe, but you can jump into it. And that's what we're asking of you, to jump into that possibility and know that all these are assured by so many beings. I have fun too thinking about the beings whose books I read. And I kind of go, hi, I'm enjoying this. I'm so glad you wrote this. There was even something in an ancient scripture from Zoroastrianism that said, hail to those who will be reading this in the future. And I cried, actually. I thought, they're actually listening to me right now. And I could feel that energy all the way through.
So I'd like to share a couple of tidbits related to this. One is that physicists have demonstrated that a particle can become entangled with another particle that doesn't even exist yet. And then that can be destroyed, and a particle that was later created from our vantage point, because we think time is going like this, but a particle that's now created, and this other one's not even there anymore, it's gone out of existence, but this can become entangled with that one that was available in the past. What? And so one other little tidbit, Roger Nelson did experiments with random number generators, and he just had this little device that all it would do is crank out random numbers. And it would store it, like on a hard disk. And so he'd bring people in the lab, and he would ask them, okay, see if you can change the output of yesterday between 2 and 3 in the afternoon so it's not random. It's already been stored. Okay, so you come in today, and then they go in, as long as nobody had looked at that data, it had not been printed out, they'd go back and look at it then, and that'd be the only time of the day that the data was statistically not random. What? But it was already there. How could it be changed after it was already there? Well, things like this really loosen up our assumptions about the way that the universe is. We are not limited to our fixed notion of ourself in this particular space and time, and we're not limited in the possibilities that we think could possibly happen from just me, or just me and several other just me's, but you get several people together that are in resonance with each other, and then the sky is the limit.
How much time is
I
that?
think that's good. So, thank you.
Thank you.